Welcome, everyone. We are going to get started about having this amazing conversation talking about joy, creativity, and human connection. I'm your kind of host, your MC, whatever you want to call me. You can call me as long as it's appropriate. My name is David Ryan Polgar. I'm the founder and president of the nonprofit All Tech is Human. If you're unfamiliar with us, thank you for joining. I'm glad you found your way. There's lots of ways to stay involved. Effectively, we are a nonprofit organization originally launched as a grassroots movement in 2018 that is bringing together people, organizations, and ideas to tackle thorny, wicked tech and society issues where we really need to come together with multi-stakeholder collaboration to understand values, tensions, trade-offs, and best practices. We just recently released our Responsible Tech Guide. You can freely download that resource at responsibletechguide.com. You can also join our Slack community of over 13,000 people across 114 countries. Also be on the lookout for our Responsible AI course or courses. We have 5 courses that are going to be dropping on October 22nd. Without further ado, I'm going to bring on our 2 esteemed guests for the day for our conversation again about joy, creativity, and human connection. And really, how do we embrace that with emerging technology? Is it working counter to joy, creativity, and human connection? Or is there a way that we can kind of embed these in our technologies? How do we find that kind of classic moment of Zen? So I'm welcoming to the stage, to our virtual stage, Michelle Culver, who is the founder of the Rithm Project. Just released a toolkit that I just downloaded, so I'm playing around with that right now. Everything that you're focused on, right, Michelle, is talking about human connection, especially with a youth audience, with the rise of AI, doing some amazing work there, but I'll have you talk all about it. I also want to bring on Tess Posner, a kind of award-winning artist and entrepreneur, formerly the CEO and the original one of AI for All. I know you have some exciting news about some of the changes there at AI for All and some of your kind of storied background. But without further ado, Michelle, Tess, welcome to the stage. How about to start things off, give everyone a little bit of context for a half an hour together. And while you're kind of listening to us with this beginning part of the conversation, please use the chat for an explanation of where you're coming from. And then there's also going to be a Q&A if you have any questions, but I also have a set of questions that I'll be discussing as well. So Michelle, love to hear a little bit more about everything that you're working on.
Great. Thanks, David. It's so fun to be in this conversation with you both.
We're
So the
excited.
Rithm Project, as some people may know, is spelled rhythm, like RITHM, inspired by this spirit of algorithm,
Yeah.
the agency we have in our relationship with technology alongside the heartbeat of humanity. And so really what we're trying to do is equip young people and the adults who support them to reclaim and evolve the way we connect as humans as AI comes and brings so much disruption. And from our perspective, AI is not inherently good or bad. No technology is, but it is certainly not neutral. And so part of the reason why this became an important conversation to me is my background is education. I actually started my career teaching in Compton in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then most recently was leading the reinvention lab at Teach for America, the innovation R&D wing for the organization. And I quickly saw that in our world, all of the conversation was about how AI is going to change the way we work and teach and learn, all of which is important. But I kept longing for the conversation about how AI is going to change the way we relate to each other as humans.
Yeah.
We really missed the mark on that 20 years ago. And so I just kept thinking, well, when we enter into this conversation, how do we do this in a way that's different from the conversations that we've had up until now? Because what got us here isn't going to get us there. And so your question, David, about joy and creativity, that's really animating the way we're trying to bring people into this conversation right now. So we'll get to more of that soon, but that's a little bit of the perspective I bring.
I love it. And I should point out too, it's always kind of been interesting since I've been in the space for a while to see how ideas go from the fringe to now being more mainstream. As you
Yeah.
saw that recent controversy that happened in New York in the subway. I'm here right in Manhattan around the friend.com where there was a little bit of backlash, right? This
Yeah.
is kind of the chatbot kind of making their own definition about what friendship was. And that led to some some pretty hilarious graffiti, which I think also resonated with people to say, well, wait a minute. We just came out of COVID. we really want to embrace what true friendship is. Maybe it's caused us to kind of reflect in a different moment. But then, obviously, early on, over the years, you've had great books like Hamlet's Blackberry. I know that's one I think came out in 2013. Really influenced a lot of my own kind of thinking in the space. And it seems definitely with a lot of the audience you work on, Michelle, right, with Gen Z, it's really kind of deeply resonates with them because I think they kind of compare and contrast watching, Friends on Netflix or wherever it's streaming now, and they see the differences. And then they also maybe see where human connection is integral and then how that can be embraced as well. But Tess, I want to bring it over to you. You're a individual of many hats, many talents as a musician, entrepreneur, and like I said, your association with AI for All as well. So how's everything going on your end? And tell everybody kind of tuning in a little bit more about your work, your passion.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, I was the founding CEO and then interim CEO of AI for All. And I'm so excited that on Monday, we officially announced our new CEO, whose name is Bo Young Lee. And she's an amazing leader with decades of experience in the responsible AI space and the diversity, equity, inclusion space. And I'm also on the board of AI for All, so supporting the organization. And we actually started in 2017. So, to your point, well before this kind of became mainstream and everyone had AI in their pockets. And really, we started with this idea that this technology is going to reshape society, reshape our relationships, reshape work, reshape many of the systems we interact with, and become kind of, to use Andrew Ng's phrase, a new electricity, which
Hmm.
I think is truly happening in many of the ways we were predicting at that time. And so we were really focused on making sure that those that are building this technology that's going to be affecting the world in such a deep and powerful way are reflecting the people that it's going to be affecting. So, really thinking about the technologists that are building and shaping this and making the important decisions and in the room and really holding that incredible power should also represent the complexity, the diversity of our society. So we run AI education programs and have done that for the last 8 years with young people to really introduce them, not just of how to build AI, but specifically how to build it responsibly, ethically, and to be empowered to kind of use this to apply towards things that they care about solving.
Hmm.
So ultimately, what I was excited about in this conversation and love both of your work and just always excited to talk to
Twice.
both of you always. So I'd come to any conversation. But in terms of this one, I think it's really around like technology as a tool. And
Hmm.
so what we build with it is a question of imagination and creativity. And I think when we get more people involved from different walks of life, different backgrounds, they are going to bring a new set of problems that they're seeing in their communities and
Yeah.
their worlds that can be solved with AI. And unless we have more voices involved with that, we're going to get a more like limited set of things being addressed or used with AI, which then will, limit the potential of this technology to solve problems that are facing all of us today. So I think that's a lot of what's exciting about AI and why we're excited to kind of share this technology and teach it to young people, because we believe in that potential and also want to teach them about the risks and potential negative implications of what they're building. So it's
Hmm.
kind of both the potential and the peril. So yeah, really excited to be here today.
Well, Tess and Michelle, you both mentioned a lot of fodder that I'm kind of writing down in my copious notes over here to my right that I want to kind of ask as quick follow-up questions. Uh, Tess, you kind of point out like the homogeny kind of problem. I know that's something, Michelle, that you also focus on with your work as well. And that's kind of near and dear to what we're doing at All Tech is Human. Really, I know kind of early on in 2018, kind of saw so many funders really in the space who were focused so much on current people in positions of power and trying to make them more ethical. And personally, I always saw that as limiting because it's like, okay, that's a good intention. That makes sense. But what about the broader community? To your point, how do you get the people who are going to be impacted by it? How does that get reflected into that DNA of the technology that's affecting how we live, love, learn, even die? It affects the human condition, the future of democracy. That's a big deal. We can stop and pause, really let that kind of sink in, right? So how do you think, I'd ask it to both of you, how do you think we can make sure we expand that conversation? Because one of the things that I've noticed is problematic, and I see this because with the large Slack that I mentioned, because I'm always on that, that large Slack, I always get pinged a lot. And people constantly, like the most common refrain is somebody says, hey, I have a background as a designer. I'm an artist. I'm a lawyer. I'm a psychologist. I'm a school teacher. Do I belong? They say, well, I don't know if I'm like fully equipped. I don't know if I understand, I think there's a little bit of tension around that of thinking like maybe they don't fit in. And my personal argument is that a lot of times you have people who are more kind of trying to actually position people away from the discussion by trying to intentionally kind of mystify some of the technology. But Tess, I'll start with you, then hand it over to Michelle. What do you kind of think about that? Because I know in so much of your work, if we're trying to embrace creativity and joy and human connection, you need to get people who really kind of like that's core value, right? Because if you take a movie like the Social Network, that now is having, I think, a new version. What really appealed to me about that is, wow, we built a social network with types of people who maybe are not naturally attuned to thinking so much deeply about the importance of friendship. But Tess, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important thing. And so we work at AI for All, we work with young people all around the country. And, one of the things that we see, I mean, from the very beginning is that, there's not a lot of role models and mentors that students might relate to. And there's like these different bubbles. I'm in the Bay Area right now. It's like every single billboard in San Francisco is about AI. But if you go to somewhere else in the country, there's really not that same kind of knowledge or being kind of exposed to it all the time. And
Yeah.
so there might be fear, or there might be the sense of, what is this? Or even like on the other side, I think we see a lot of magical thinking with AI where it's
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, what is that? Like, I think, it's easy to be fooled either way, like think that it's the Terminator or evil, or think that it's like magical and can do anything and not be exposed to it in the way that we are in the bubble. So we've really had to break that with our programs and connect young people. Like we have a mentorship component where
Hmm.
students are connecting with mentors in the field and they're working on AI projects. So they're kind of they're demystifying the technology while also getting to connect with like someone who's actually a researcher or product developer and getting that kind of hands-on connection and seeing, okay, it's not just what's portrayed in the media. There's actually people that I can relate to that look like me, that have
Mm.
similar backgrounds in the space. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And we're also trying to like change the narrative and really think about bringing and Michelle is amazing at this. And like, I went to her summit and she had all these young people there to have the voices of young people represented, because that's another thing. It's like, who's actually being talked about? You see these like few figures that are really dominating the media about AI, but
Yeah.
that's not the full story at all. Like there's a lot of other things going on that we can collectively bring out and share more. And I think that that will help with what you're saying, not only to demystify and inspire people and make them feel hopeful that they can be part of it too. Like this
Hmm.
includes you. This
I
includes
love that.
everyone, not just some people.
Well, you
And
said
and
that.
also inspire new ideas. Yeah.
Yep. Well, I was going to say, Tess, you set that up as a beautiful segue. So why don't we hand that over to Michelle to actually tell us a little bit more about the summit, the test that you were at and that you discussed. I mean, what was the value there? Tell us a little bit about maybe the youth engagement and maybe their own kind of perceptions about this topic area of joy, creativity, and human connection.
Well, I love what you're saying, Tess, about we're presented with these narratives that are extremes. It's either all good or all bad. And we don't see, again, our own diversity of perspectives in this country reflected in who's designing and creating this. The other thing I'll add to that too is that we talk often about the future as though
Hmm.
it is singular and predetermined. And already, we're like past, present, and then this thing is about to happen. And so this idea of opening up the conversation and imagining, giving ourselves permission to expand the potential for what we can start to dream into feels so core to this moment. And so for us, in the Rithm Project, one of the ways we do that is we bring together at these summits these multi-generational cross-sector rooms. So there's young
Mhm.
people, there's more seasoned folks, there are educators, mental health professionals, researchers, a wide range of vantage points. But we create a shared experience from which to then mine those diversity of perspectives, because otherwise we can start to talk past each other. So what we do is we invite folks into one of my favorite parts of the summit is we invite folks into what we call immersive AI futures. And this was really inspired by Australian futurist Stuart Candy. And then we worked
And your husband is a futurist, right, for
my
Salesforce?
husband, who there's no question, part of the reason why I'm on this track is because he's a futurist himself. And so we
Mhm.
sit around talking about how much investment, frankly, the private sector gets to put into thinking about foresight and how
Wow.
rarely we get to invest in that in the social sector. And so part of what we want to do is help people see, well, what's coming? Like what's here today, to Tessa's point. Let's tinker and demystify by playing with what's here and possible. And then let's imagine the year 2040. So we time travel. We invite folks into the year 2040. And we've worked with a production company called Odd Productions. They're amazing creators. And so folks enter into 4 different possible futures. One is you're signing up for a consumer product. Another is at a birthday party, or is it not a birthday party? What is this new retailing culture in the year 2040? And basically, through these experiences, we have a visceral experience where the performers engage you just as though you're in that future. And you're there for a little bit. And the point is not to say this is the future, because again, nobody knows. We're all co-creating it right now. But at
Totally.
the end of it, you've had this very, not a heady experience about it, but a human, visceral, felt experience of what it could be like in 2040. And from that place, we say, what do you love about this and want to act our way into? What do you hate
Mm.
and want to mitigate against? And then what does it mean for our leadership today? And then we get to have a conversation with all of these different vantage points to mine the difference in perspectives. And what we see is in that moment, and this happens also like through games and through discussions. It doesn't just have to be something this built out, but it's an invitation to say, well, what do you think about it? And then all of a sudden you can feel like you have a role in creating that future because
Mm.
it's not outside of you. It's not being done to you. And that to me is like I would just say one of the most exciting moments that we have right now is to help more and more people through conversations start to locate themselves in shaping this,
I
feeling
love it.
something about the possibility and then moving to act.
Well, a quick question
And
for both of
Michelle, that
you.
was
Oh,
such a,
Tess, yeah,
oh,
go.
sorry. I just wanted to shout out Michelle because those immersive experiences were so profound for me. I got to experience it. I was so lucky to be there. And it was something that I still think about and talk about like all the time with people. I'm like, I wish you could have done this because it sort of gets at this point that we're talking about, which is how do we actually imagine new futures? And to
Mm.
your point, Michelle, like that embodiment is so much a part of it and doing it with others. Like it's not just me watching a Black Mirror episode in my house and going, oh my God, what the hell is going to happen? And then feeling despair, or like scrolling through social media and being like, I don't know what's real. Like we were just talking before the call about Sora and how, suddenly like it's made me doubt the rest of social media, even though it's like this its
Yeah,
own platform right now.
Mm.
And I think a lot of this work is happening in isolation when people are just on their computers or on the internet and together having an embodied experience of really like wrestling with this. And maybe there's
Mm.
this idea of like you're sort of having to do change management with society or something. Like we're all just feeling it out and being like, what does this mean? Like, do
yes,
we want this? And I
yes,
think, Michelle, you're creating a container for that. And that has to be expanded. Like I wish everyone could have that experience because we're all questioning that. Like, what does this mean? And how do we have more agency for the
that's right.
future?
Actually, one thing may I say too, just to build on this, like part of it's so funny because we have this game called the AI effect, which is intended just to be a game where you can debate with other people in person,
Mhm.
holding tactile cards to look at all these different use cases for how AI could show up in your life. And then for any given one, is that going to strengthen human connection? Is it going to erode
Mm.
it? Or it depends. And it's a game where you get to discord, have divergent points of view practice and surfaced. And the winner is the person who pushes the thinking on that round the most, because being in person, sharing ideas, holding nuance, holding uncertainty, like that is actually one of the human capabilities we need to double down on in order to then be poised to reap the benefits of the technology and then eyes wide open start to mitigate those risks. But we don't have the space to do that kind of meaning making and
Mhm.
practice building those kinds of conversations. So something like this again underscores the point that there is no right answer. Nobody knows the future. There's not a right or wrong. This stuff is going to show up in a myriad of different ways. And so how do we practice being in conversation with each other and with ourselves to ask, well, what is the intention I want? And then how do I, either as a producer, a builder, or just a consumer of any given tool, actively choose consciously how to use it, like use it in a way
Mhm.
that strengthens the relationships, but also know when to put it away or um, step aside. So that is a whole new capability we have to learn both individually and together as a
Yeah.
society.
And I would just say, and then we'll get to a few questions that just came in the chat that I'll read off. Some really good questions. And both of you kind of inferred it, and then Tess, you mentioned how do we imagine new futures? Obviously, and then it's inferred in both of your respective work. That also relies on us not feeling kind of nihilistic or not thinking that our future is already predetermined, that we kind of rely on our own agency to kind of tilt our tech future in a way that kind of embraces our values, our humanity, and is in a direction that's better for the overall public interest. From your own kind of experience, especially with young individuals, where do you think we are in that? Do you find that most people have a sense of agency, or do you think that overall kind of media narrative is an essential part? Because I would argue that if you already accept that the future is predetermined, somebody is never going to be motivated to change anything because they already think that, hey, it doesn't matter what we do, we're already on some natural digitalization path, and that we're just adjusting to the future as opposed to determining the future. How about Tess? We'll start off with you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think that, a lot of people are feeling hopeless right now. And I just want to name that. I
Yeah.
think I see that a lot, not just in the media, but just among people. And I think we're so oversaturated with information, with media, that it's hard to cut yourself off. Like never before do we know about everything that's going on around the world. And we're getting like sensory overload of bad
Hmm.
things happening all the time. So it's very easy to be overwhelmed by that. And I see that everywhere. And at the same time, something that really breaks through that, I like to say hope is a verb. Like we
Mm.
have to, or like provoke hope is one of my favorite things to say,
Yeah.
is like we have to do that, and we have to take action there, because it's not something that is just going to happen, come out of the sky like organically. And so for me, like one of the ways that I provoke hope is to tell the stories of our young people at AI for All who are like, I just went to our project portfolio presentations a few weeks ago, and the students were doing projects like AI to detect Alzheimer's,
Hmm.
AI to detect brain tumors, AI to, I don't know, like figure out what's a deep fake, AI to help provide more accessible scrolling for people with visual impairment. So there's all these examples, literally hundreds of projects in in those categories of like something that people want to solve and help the world with. And I think that example, whenever I say that to people, they're like, oh, really? That's going on. So it's just another example of like the stories that we tell. And if you zoom into something, there's so much that's going on like that, whether it's Michelle's work, your work, David,
Hmm.
or like telling these stories of people that are provoking hope, that are building a more positive future. I think it's out there and we just need to share it more. And definitely working with young people is one way, because they tend to be just more fresh with
Yeah.
their perspectives about the future. Like a lot of older generations, frankly, are jaded and are like, oh, this is just going to go the way of social media and like it's going to destroy everything. And like, no, don't buy into that. Like, that's just our projection onto the future. Like you said, Michelle, we don't know what it is. So let's imagine something new.
Yeah.
And to your point, Cass, just about the generational difference, that's one of the things that comes up the most in our research. So, 76% of 72% of young people have tried using AI for relational or social purposes, and over half are regular users. But when you talk to them, what we find is that basically young people are saying, yes, I am using AI in a myriad of ways, either because I'm curious and and I want advice, or and I want to vent about the person who left me unread, or I want ideas about how to re-engage in a conversation that feels really triggering to me, or maybe I feel lonely, and so I'm actually talking to a character, because it's fun and it's an entertaining way to feel less alone. So whatever the thing is that they're telling us, it is very much an integrated part of their lives already, and yet they consistently tell us they're not talking to the adults in their lives about it. So they're not talking to their parents about it, and they're not talking to their teachers about it, primarily because they say they can feel our fear and judgment. And the last thing, I mean, I don't want to be judged. And a teenager doesn't want to be shamed for doing something that feels like it's adding value to your life. And so I think the biggest risk we have is to this idea of building agency right now is that we're not reaping the benefits of that multi-generational diversity. And therefore, young people who actually have a lot to add to this conversation, we're not getting that into the leadership lens of certain decision-making authorities, positions, and young people are left unguided, actually, in a really underdeveloped space, which has, again, both some real benefits, but some very, very serious consequences. And there isn't any counsel for them in that. So I see in the chat that there's people who are having those conversations and in classrooms in India. That I just find, yes, people, to your question earlier, David, yes, young people step into this with agency when we create the space for it. But right now, those spaces are not being curated and then held well enough for that sort of honest discussion to emerge. And so to me, I think there's so much potential to your question about agency, but we're not on that track unless we pause to invite more of that curiosity.
It's hard to cultivate that type of environment. It's hard work, but obviously very essential. So I'm going to get to some of the questions. I see a flurry of questions that just came in. Realized I now have 14 hours worth of material, and I'm no Cory Booker, so I'm not going to be here for 14 hours. We'll be closing out probably about 10 or 15. So we'll get to this question that Marianne just asked. How do you stay optimistic that we can still make a difference in how technology is changing intimacy? A huge discussion right now. You might have read about X.AI and Elon Musk's work in that with intimacy chatbots. Continue on the question. I'm not convinced those who should be listening care enough about these issues, and adolescents are already forming their concept of intimacy in a direction that is AI mediated. I'm a clinical psychologist and a sex therapist, so I'm deeply watching this process. Very interesting, right? There's always been a discussion about how emerging technology affects our human-to-human relationships, our relationships with significant others. Tess, why don't we start with you? Are you feeling optimistic, or what are you seeing kind of working with a younger audience? Then we'll pop that over to Michelle as well.
Yeah, I think like Michelle was saying, like we're seeing young people kind of experiment with this more because they're maybe more open to it or kind of just naturally gravitate towards that. And also on the other end of it, like you were saying too, is that there's loneliness, there's disconnection, there's a sense of not having the support or the community that maybe used to exist in society. And so turning to machines for that intimacy or that support is becoming more common. And we're seeing it having pretty devastating consequences. Like we've seen it leading to suicide or to, strange instances of like AI induced psychosis, I think it's being called, and people really getting tied in a way that we didn't really expect. And frankly, somebody said the other day, which I thought was so interesting, that We're basically in like a 500 million person psychological experiment right now, because everybody probably who's listening right now has had different things come up. It's like, oh, what did Chat GPT say to you? Like
Yeah.
each one of these things may do strange things. We can't really control it or rein it in. Even if there's like these safeguards put in, it's still unclear if that's going to be sufficient to really rein it in. And so each person like that has this relational component with a chatbot is in a sense having a personal experience that we can't really predict. And so that makes it like this mass experiment that we don't really know how it's affecting us. But I do want to say, and I know Michelle has a lot to say about this because
Mm-hmm.
that's where a lot of her work is, but just to say one more thing, I think a lot of times that the problems that this is stemming from are not technological in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are going to AI because there's some kind of deeper human need that's not being met by our modern society. And it's true also that the solve for it may not be a technology. Like it might be to create more community, to create more support, more mental health resources.
Yeah.
If we fill that need, people won't go seeking for it in the wrong places. And it's kind of like the easiest thing to just fit into that need right now. But I do believe that there's a lot of other things that we need to work on as a society. Just to point out one thing that I learned about recently is called the US Chamber of Human Connection,
Oh,
which is a
wow.
new initiative that just came out. And one of the things they're doing is like having, for example, onboarding in new cities for like new residents. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of you move to a new city and you're like, I don't know anyone, I'm just going to feel really isolated and lonely. And like, how do I actually make connections? And so they're going to help provide that like fabric and that connection to new residents. And I think, and they're going to do a bunch of other stuff too. And I feel like that's just a great example of where we can be creative with new ideas about how we can address these basic human needs within people so that technology doesn't need to fill that gap. And then I think naturally, organically, if we fill those needs, the technology will have a more healthy role in our society.
I like that. Kind of reminds me just quickly of Bowling Alone, early book, Robert Putnam, really kind of talking about that, how traditionally we, focus on things like Elks Club, and you had a community, and we had smaller houses, and you had closer neighborhoods, and a normal kind of interaction, and how that kind of adjusted over time, and its certain kind of ramification. Certainly influenced a lot of my own work. Michelle, any thoughts on that? And then we'll get to a few of the other questions. So again, the overall question was talking about, are you optimistic around kind of the impact of emerging technology on intimacy, and also tangentially related to whether people in positions of power, certain leaders, are listening, and then taking this kind of seriously to make the needed changes.
Mm. I think maybe what I just want to underscore how resonant Tess's point about the human needs that we have, and there's many ways we can meet those human needs. Technology is one way, and there are so many other important ancient technologies that have helped guide us as societies, whether that's coming together in prayer or in play or singing or in meditation or dance. These sort of rituals that help us regulate with ourselves and then with each other, and to come together in the commons to debate and discuss what's in the best interest of the collective. Those infrastructures, like the decline of religion and schools that really have not been designed as places of belonging, those sort of ancient technologies, wisdom,
Hmm.
human intelligence, has been, I think, still in all of us, but muted. And so part of, I think, the way to have more hope and optimism about our ability to use the artificial or modern technologies is to dial this up too. And Tess, I'm thinking about your music.
Which we're
And
going to hear, I think, a little bit later as we close out.
I love you as a model of that, somebody who invests so deeply in the creative practices. I have an image of you in your garden, and it's like, I think that really is trying to make that more equitable and accessible and a part of the design of our public infrastructure. So public schools that could be designed to do that, or workplaces that are designed to do that. Then I think these other technologies become a really powerful, productive tool. So I was just texting with a young person today. Actually, she was sharing with me that she is herself really lonely. And she was describing how she's been talking to ChatGPT about the loneliness. And in that
Mm.
choice, it's coaching her. She was like asking basically in a numbers game to try to increase the likelihood I find someone who I connect with. Do I have to just go on the dating apps? Do I have to go make lots of friends and big social parties? That's not her nature. And the app was, ChatGPT was coaching her to instead find the people in her proximate circle. And so she's making choices
Mm.
like not wearing her, earbuds in
Earbuds.
when she goes to the gym to increase the likelihood that the people in proximity could actually create some serendipity,
Mm.
and
Wow.
discover contact. And that's AI coaching her on how to create more human relationships. I
Hmm.
do also think because it is so uncomfortable to be in the messiness of rejection,
Yeah.
or even when you do have a friendship or a romance that starts to feel like something's there, the fear of loss, the fear that maybe they'll go away, this good thing is going to go away, or shit, they have their own needs and their own interests and their own schedule, and doesn't match up with mine. These chatbots are designed to look and sound how you want, to tell you how great you are, to be available 24 hours a day. And I do think that's a seductive,
Yeah.
a very seductive, very dangerous alternative. And so, again, if we don't invest in sort of these human technologies and some of the regulation to mitigate some of the risks of these bots that are designed to hook into those human needs and foster emotional attachment, then I think we are in a really vulnerable place. So I wouldn't say I'm optimistic. I see where this could go well, but I don't think that's the path we're on right now, if I were to say the predicted future.
Yeah, certainly reminds me of the old movie Her, right? That came out about a decade ago, and that seems to be quite topical at this moment. Since we're nearing the end, we got a bunch of questions. Unfortunately, we can't get to all of them. Seeing some really positive movement about a lot of college students who are building their own kind of social clubs. I know I get to talk to a bunch of people who are doing the same thing. You've seen the rise of Gen Z, sometimes getting into analog technologies. I like to think of it as kind of like equaling out that equilibrium, right? Finding kind of certain feels and smells that maybe are missing from digitalization, and where are we, finding that balance. So our last question, I like to define this as the but capitalism question, seems to always come up in any conversation. The question from Brandon Brown says, don't think we can have this discussion without talking about the market incentives that attract capital and all the things that follow it towards applications that drive engagement rather than solve problems. To bring these approaches deeper into the mainstream, we'll need more public-private partnerships and the more, in the R word, quote unquote, regulation. So any thoughts on that? Because I know in my own work, that is a natural tension, right? We talk about, why are people choosing, profits over people? And you realize, well, that's kind of the structure of capitalism. Therein lies a big part of the rub. So, Tess, why don't we start with you on that? What are you seeing in terms of market incentives, your own background as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a great point, and I think something that is, a tension in this conversation because often like incentives are driving a lot of things. They're driving where the money goes.
Hmm.
They're driving what problems people want to solve. On the other hand, something good about capitalism when you come back to the core of it is like it's about solving problems, right?
Hmm.
It's about finding what is a market need. Market need can be something that solves a big problem for humanity. So my hope is that, and I know a lot of people that are working on business ideas, like for-profit ideas that are positive for humanity, because obviously like things that, it depends on what kind of viewpoint you have, right? Like for
Hmm.
example, with climate stuff, it's like, well, you might say that doesn't help us in the near term, but in the longer term, this is going to benefit our society in consequential ways. And if we don't do something about it, it will hurt the bottom line to the extent that we have catastrophic disasters that are going to directly affect business performance and things like that. So I think depending on what kind of view you take, and if you take a more holistic view, that's something that not everybody does. Like we have very short-term ways of thinking, but I think that's starting to change. I mean, over time, people are seeing more of a bigger picture perspective on this.
Hmm.
And I think to your point, David, public-private partnerships can be really critical here. but we also have to be creative and think of new models, because I think that the regulation question, like at least here in the United States, like it's not going to happen fast enough to maybe have the impact that some folks want. So what's the alternative, And government funding, like we may not get government funding for public benefit AI. So where's the money going to come from? That
Mm-hmm.
we have to answer that question, because we can't wait for the government to act, and we can't wait for, I think that's where the agency comes back. Like
Definitely.
one of the things that's exciting about AI is like any of us can be an entrepreneur. Like you can do something yourself in a way
Yeah.
that you never could before. And so is there a way that like this whole thing sparks a whole new generation of like micro entrepreneurs that are solving problems and maybe like thinking about new interesting ways of funding these projects together more collectively? I don't know. There could be totally new models, like edging us a little bit more towards futuristic ways of thinking and pushing the boundaries here, that I'm really excited about. And I'm hoping that more and more innovation will come from that as well.
I love it. And there's groups like Second Muse that has Headstream that funds a lot kind of in that space. And even if you look at the last 10 years, what happened in digital well-being, you had a lot of entrepreneurs who had kind of digital distraction types of reduction tools. And those really influenced all the major media platforms to kind of embed that in their own products. So Michelle, any thoughts on this final question?
Well, I really agree, frankly, with Brandon that regulation is a part of the path forward. And I agree with Tess that it probably won't happen fast enough and will even still be a pretty blunt tool to raise the floor instead of actually helping us get into a pro-social vision for the future.
Hmm.
And so I think maybe in light of that, like if we accept that as true, which by the way, I love people who challenge that, but if we accept that as true, um, then to me, one of the most important opportunities is to create a movement that is declaring human connection as a value that we want to be
Mm.
paramount in this next phase of tech development, and where the markets are a part of claiming that as, and that to be a part of that feels irresistible and unstoppable because we are
Hmm.
unwilling to fall prey to the seductive tendencies of replacing human relationships with artificial intelligence. And so if we declare that as a society and we really prioritize that, then I do think we can shape markets in powerful ways. But I want to say we're not on that path right now, and it's not to be taken for granted
Hmm.
because again, these technologies um, are empowering. They also add value, so they're not all wrong or bad. So in a world where it's serving our needs in ways that are empowering and positive, and then also have a dark side and an Achilles heel, being able to be discerning about that. One sometimes we basically say to young people, um, you know, why would you prioritize a human relationship that is going to be messy and
Mm.
vulnerable, and you might face social rejection, and it might feel terrible actually. Why choose that over something that's going to feel really good and give you the information and affirmation you need right away? Why would you make that choice? And so we really grapple with that because there is tremendous growth and profound development that comes on the other side, but it's not like you're signing your head, like very few of us are saying, yeah, I want the hard path. So I do think it's going to take a lot of conscious conversation to bring an awareness to this, to help us reclaim this thing that has defined us for millennia, that is vulnerable right now, this sense
Yeah.
of human relationships. But if we do, I think that has the power to shape markets in profound ways.
I love that. I love it. Right. Relationships are messy, relationships are difficult, but relationships are fulfilling and essential, right? So lastly, where can everybody stay in touch with all of your incredible work? Tess, we'll start with you. Where can people follow along with your music, your career, some of the great work that AI for All is continuing to do?
Yeah, definitely would love to connect with you all. I love these questions too. What a great conversation. Thank you everyone for chiming in, and please feel free to connect with me. I'd love to continue the conversation. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tess Posner, or email tessposner@gmail.com. Or you can find my music, Tess Posner. It's all Tess Posner. everywhere, Spotify. And yeah, would love to connect with you. I think someone mentioned the Artificiality Summit. I'm going to be there in a couple weeks. So if anyone's going to be there, would love to hang out there.
Wonderful. Michelle.
You can find us also on LinkedIn, and we have a Substack that we would love to share with you all. It's a place where we learn in public. So it's not sometimes it's our reports and things that we've learned that we're releasing to the field. Today it was again a toolkit that we shared to help foster conversations between young people and adults. But more often than not, it's the messy musings, the things that we're learning along the way, and we invite you into conversation through our Substack. We post regularly on LinkedIn, and you can find me at Michelle at the Rithm, RITHM, project.org.
I love it. Maybe we can license some Janet Jackson, make it into a Rhythm Nation as the Rhythm Project continues to grow. Again, I'm David Polgar with All Tech is Human. Find me also on LinkedIn or go to alltechishuman.org. Drop me a line, david@alltechishuman.org. Let's stay in touch. Meet for a coffee if you find yourself in New York. So, Michelle, Tess, thank you so much for the conversation. Everyone who participated, thank you as well. We'll share all these links in our newsletter and on social as well. Thank you all. You can dance out to the music.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank
you so much for having us. Thank you, everybody.